and this is the Incongruous channel, and I'm Dr. Andy Yates, and today we're going to be talking about dinosaurs and dragons, because that was the show I did on Beetroot Radio, and that's now available as a podcast on www.drandyyates.com. And this channel, Incongruous, presents just a kind of squeezed down version of that, just to give you a taste, and actually this time to give you some of the things that I learned, because I learned quite a lot of kind of fundamental things that I'm thought, well, I didn't know that. So I'm going to share that with you. So if you like this video or you just appreciate my efforts, please like, share and subscribe. Thank you. So, dinosaurs. Let's go back in time. 250 million years ago. And what happened then was a thing called the Permian-Triassic extinction event. Because the kind of way it went, and it gets very, very complicated with different geological areas and eras that all have different names, and then the different ways they classify things. So I'll try not to get into that, to be honest, because I don't really get my head around all of it. But anyway, you had the Permian, then this extinction event, what they call the PT, Permian-Triassic extinction event, 250 million years ago. Then there was the Triassic, then there was the Jurassic, which most of us have heard about. Then there's the Cretaceous era. And then 66 million years ago was another extinction event, which I'm going to call the KT event, but it's the Cretaceous Tertiary extinction event. So let's talk about the one 250 million years ago. What happened then? Well, the similar thing. Asteroid, volcanoes exploding, acidification of the ocean, caused an incredible 57 different biological species just wiped out. The whole family tree, the whole thing. Incredibly destructive. Now, what was interesting was there were two different types of creatures, which are differentiated by something to do with the shape of their skull. Just so you know, synapsids and diapsids. And the synapsids were often called mammal-like. The more modern version of that is proto-mammal. So it was as if on their evolutionary path they were actually becoming mammals 250 million years ago. And of course the speculation is, if this extinction event had not occurred, because this is the kind of game we're going to play during this little 20-minute session here, what would have happened if they'd have been allowed to continue? Well, I'm not going to talk too much about that, but just think about it, because if the mammals were already evolving right then, 250 million years ago, that sort of gave us something like 150 million years or whatever of more advanced evolution. What would we be like now? Would we even exist right now? Fascinating, isn't it? And what I find fascinating is the first extinction event kind of took out the mammals, or at least stopped their evolution. In came the dinosaurs, because they were allowed to, because of all this extinction event. And then another extinction event took out the dinosaurs, and the mammals continued and became us. So it's fascinating, isn't it, how that happened? But anyway, as I said, 250 million years ago, this happened. They ended up with the creatures called the archosaurs, which at one time were in a little band across the equator. That's where they found the fossils. And then after the extinction event, after maybe 10 million, 20 million years, once evolution got going, so around 230 million years ago, suddenly the archosaurs spread everywhere. And one of the classification of animals that came from the archosaurs was the dinosaurs. And the first dinosaur they reckon so far they found is one called Eoraptor, which is a little guy, weighed about 25 pounds, was basically slim, two little sort of smaller arms at the front, bigger hind legs, tail, head, classic kind of almost a cartoon dinosaur, but a little one. And must have been pretty fast, but of course there were other ones around that side, types of archosaurs, like crocodiles, for example. And there were two-legged crocodiles, which is a bit scary. But nothing really to differentiate it from that. But it was something to do with the dinosaurs, because of their different way their lungs work. They hadn't got a diaphragm. that they were better able to cope with low oxygen conditions, which some scientists have said would have existed after that PET extinction event. What else? There was water retention, because mammals have got more glands on the skin particularly, and so they lose water all the time. We sweat, we kind of exude moisture from our body, right? Which is why we have to shower every day. And or at least some of them don't smell, do anyway. And there was another one which I can't think of, which but basically there were these things that made them more likely to evolve. Oh, that's right, they could stand on their hind legs more ably, which meant they could reach higher up the trees, which meant they could attack things and so on. So they were better able and suited for survival, and then the whole dinosaur era went ahead, and you ended up in the Jurassic with dinosaurs being certainly the dominant creatures on the earth, whereas back in the Permian it was these proto-mammals that were the dominant species on the earth. So you get that idea. So as they got different sizes, different shapes and so on, bigger, larger, smaller, more specialized, with bony plates and spikes and clubs and lots of teeth. And one of the things I learned was the Tyrannosaurus rex, which is one of the biggest, most presumably ferocious predators, was that they were horizontal. You may wonder what I'm talking about. Think of a swing, a seesaw in a playground, right? And it's kind of about the same weight at either end, and it's got a single pivot in the middle. And that basically is the anatomy of a Tyrannosaurus rex. Great big head, great big tail, and then the balance in the middle, those two massive muscular back legs. Its front legs weren't useless. They could lift maybe 400 pounds or so, they reckon. But pretty much it did everything on its back legs. You see, and we're kind of in this little segment we're doing here, slowly working to the idea of, could anything have survived? Right? Well, we know 250 million years ago, probably nothing substantial survived. And anyway, the dinosaurs came along and they were so big and strong and powerful and ferocious that they would have probably taken care of anything that survived that event from the proto-mammals. But could anything have survived to become a dragon? Ah, you get the idea where we're going, you see. So, Tyrannosaurus rex, kind of dragon-like, because, you know, it's big, it's fierce, it's got lots of teeth and stuff like this. But they reckon the Tyrannosaurus, they don't even know yet whether it could run, because it was 40 feet long, it weighed 10 ton plus. It was a massive creature. And they reckon it could turn pretty fast, because if you think of back to that seesaw with the pivot in the middle, you could spin it that way as well as that way a bit, but mainly horizontal, right? Which is the surprise to me, because there's lots of creatures like that, and they would have all been pretty much horizontal. But anyway, so probably not something as big and powerful as that. Now we come to another one, which of course is the raptors. Okay, famous ones, the velociraptor, which we know from the movie, right? And then another one called the Utah raptor, which is one of the biggest, which was like 20 feet long, weighed over 1,000 pounds. Not really heavy for its size, because it was light, flexible, mobile, which is much more of our idea of a dragon. We'll come on to that. And they had that killing claw. So their second finger on their claw was always stuck up like this. And they could perhaps use it for shredding and ripping and so on. Maybe it was used to fight in mating rituals, something like that. Who knows? But anyway, there's a whole range of dinosaurs had that killing claw. And they came up with a dinosaur, found its remains, called a Troodon. And a Troodon was a smaller dinosaur, 11 feet, probably only weighed, they reckon, 110 pounds. So that's a pretty lithe, skinny dinosaur. Had the killing claw. But basically it was just a fairly simple dinosaur. Hadn't got scales or spikes or anything like this, but presumably pretty fast. But what it did have was a larger brain. And we know we have got to where we are, whether that's a good thing for the planet or not. We've got to where we are because our brain has developed in certain ways. And we're able to think better about things. Think out of the box, although I hate that phrase. Be creative, imaginative, come up with new thoughts, right? Not just active on instinct. Well, there's the Troodon with his better brain. And we all think the Velociraptor was more intelligent. Probably not quite as intelligent as you see on the movies, but hey, smarter than the average dinosaur. There you go. So could it have developed into anything else? Now, there was a scientist, a paleontologist, Canadian guy. I could look up his name, but I can't be bothered. And he came up with this idea of a dinosauroid. So if it were dinosauroid. So if you want to look that up, put that name into Google, it'll come up. And he, in the 1980s, came up with this hypothetical kind of thought experiment and said, well, what if a dinosaur had survived that second extinction event, the 66 million year ago one, that took out all the large non-avian dinosaurs, right? Because the birds survived, the avian ones, but the non-avian dinosaurs. What if a species survived somehow? And that was his thought. How would that have developed? And you could actually go out and see a model they had made of what this creature would look at. It was sort of upright, two-legged, very humanoid, with 3 fingers on each hand, and they're kind of opposable so they could grasp things. Forward-facing eyes, reptilian skin, still egg-laying, because that's a dinosaur, right? And his critics said, you know, oh, no, it wouldn't be like that. It'd be much more horizontal, like the T-Rex. And also, it was less likely to use its hands on its forelimbs to manipulate things. It would have used its mouth and its feet, like birds do. But of course, birds don't have arms. They have wings instead. So that's the interesting thing. But then I thought about it, you know, and I thought, well, okay, if we've got a hypothetical dragon that could have somehow escaped this extinction event and evolved over time, what kind of properties would it have? And I thought it's got to have 3 things to be our traditional idea of being a dragon, right? It's got to be reptilian-like. It's got to be able to fly, and it's got to be able to shoot fire. Now, reptilian-like, well, that would be the Troodon, right? It's reptilian, it's got the reptilian skin, it lays eggs, does all that kind of thing. It's got forward-facing eyes, it's got ears or holes for ears. It's got claws on its front feet, claws on its back feet, and that killing claw. It's probably feathered somewhat or a lot. But then when you see depictions of Asian dragons, they're often feathered. Lots of teeth, big strong mouth, that kind of thing. Well, that could be a descendant of a dinosaur. Easily. What about flying? Well, the flying were the pterosaurs. And the biggest one of those, or at least one of the biggest one of those, is a thing called a Quetzalcoatlus. Quetzalcoatl being the Incan god, I think. The feathered serpent, right? Yeah, maybe they knew something about it. But anyway, so that was Quetzalcoatlus. And it was had a 50-foot wingspan. It was 10 foot tall at the shoulder with its wings folded. But it had a long beak, sort of beaked head, long beaked head, which is not really the teeth and everything like this. But some of the smaller ones, I think there's one called Dimorphodon, which had a big square head with lots of teeth and stuff like that, very dragon-like. But it was only a little guy, so wingspan of 4 or 5 feet. So 3 pounds in weight, something like this. So they varied. But that would be how one could fly. Because they couldn't have developed from bats, because bats are too small. Biggest one we got now is 5 foot, with about 3 pounds in weight. And unlikely to have developed from birds, because birds have different wings, because you want those bat-like wings that a dragon has. So you get it. But then we come to the final one, which is fire. And no creature ever on Earth has been identified as using fire. Not even close. There are some insects, the bombardier beetle's one that's often quoted, that uses two chemicals and puts it together, and it creates a toxic mix that is at a high temperature, but it's a hot liquid, not fire. And it's very toxic, and it uses it for defense. It can spurt it out of its bottom, I think. And it's good for defense, but it's not fire. And when you see it on the movies, it's a gas jet coming out of the mouth. Nah, I don't think so. So if we take that one out of the equation, we just need a reptilian type creature who can fly, who's the right sort of size, shape, and that sort of thing. The Quetzalcoatlus that I mentioned actually ran at about 500 pounds in weight. Well, that would be a big beast to have flying around in the sky. Certainly more than pretty much any human being. So that would be a phenomenal creature. Plus it would have had all that subtlety and the lightness and the agility and so on and so forth. So likely to be a pterosaur. So the question is, could one have survived? Because the conspiracy theory that says there are reptilians who are running the world, blah, 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 they either came from outer space or they actually survived the KT extinction event, the Cretaceous Tertiary extinction event, 66 million years ago. That, in my idea, was how we'd have a dragon. So what would that look like? I've got a little note here. It would have evolved through bird or dinosaur paths. They would not breathe fire, but they would be kind of 8 to 10 feet tall at the shoulders. They would be capable of gliding or flying short instances. And like a lot of creatures like that, with the bat-like wings, they wouldn't have front legs. They would have claws on the kind of elbow joints of their wings. Do you get what I mean? When their wings are folded up on their elbow joints to grasp hold of things like this. So they would be able to grab things. Scaled skin, perhaps feathers as well. Strong hind legs. The front limbs would basically be their wings with the claws on. And large, strong heads with lots of teeth. That would be a dragon, wouldn't it? And the question we ask ourselves is, because we find creatures all the time, it was only 100 years ago we discovered the Komodo dragon, which is actually a lizard, I think, because it's squat and its feet go out to the side. If its feet were under it, it would be more of a reptile. But its feet are out the side, so it's more of a lizard. But it's 10 feet long. It's big, heavy, 200-pound weight. Is it possible that something could have survived or evolved from somehow dinosaur organisms or something to actually produce a dragon? Because we see dragons all over the world, in mythology, in legend, in stories and stuff like this. Is it possible there could have been a dragon? And that is my suggestion. If there were such a thing as a dragon, it would have come probably from the pterosaurs, maybe from the birds. It would have been this creature, because 8 to 10 feet long at the shoulders, probably 20, 30, 40 feet long in length total, 40, 50 foot wingspan, 500, 400, 500 pounds in weight. That would be a phenomenal beast. And idiot humans at the time may have thought it's a good thing to prove their bravery by going out and killing them all, so there's none left for us to look at now. What a great idea. There we are. So that is Dinosaurs to Dragons. And this is Dr. Andy Yates on the Incongruous channel. All I can say now is, please, take care.